We saw the 747 coming towards the stadium, and the initial feeling, like in that row, and this guy flying the 747 was actually flying a message of good luck to the Springboks, and I actually go cold thinking of it now. And I remember looking at it and going, we're history. They're going to crash a plane into this stadium because nobody knew this plane was coming. So, and it was so low, I don't want to quote something that's not true, but he had special dispensation. I think he flew 100 meters over the stadium. 100 meters when you've got this aircraft coming from 6 kilometers away feels like it's coming straight for the stadium. You know, that was just one memory I have of so many. And then very lucky as well, and Dallen will tell you, I mean, we both have a very good friend who I grew up with, who ended up kicking the drop goal to win it in Joel. So Joel and I have been friends ever since we met at 13 years old. So and actually managed to go out with him that night and have one or two quiet ones that evening. So
he's so dangerous. Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen and the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Oh, it's more dangerous than climate change.
Hello and welcome to episode 9. This week we catch up with the brilliance, the humble, the coaching legend that is Gary Gold. Honestly, it was such an insightful episode, hearing about Gary's background, his experiences in the game, just invaluable. And it's funny, I've known Gary since the late 90s, stalked him during the Rugby magazine time period where he had some rugby IQ to share with rugby coaches. It was absolutely brilliant. And then I didn't realize he was coaching Villagers, which is a local rugby club in Cape Town that played against my team, the University of Cape Town, back in the day. And it's been really great to be able to commentate his Eagle matches here in the US since about 2018. I'm also really thankful to get to catch up with him over a beverage in Cape Town. Every year we go to Forries, which is a famous little pub near Newlands Rugby Ground. And who do you know? There's Gary Gold sinking a few jars with some other legends. So I always get a chance to run into him. Such a great man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed from my, having my coaching hat on with Gary, just being, of course, super humble about his humble beginnings as a coach and respectful, thankful of his opportunities in the early days, and then how hard he worked his craft and to understand the game. And obviously he's got one of the most impressive coaching CVs in the world. Yet today he's still on the hunt for his programs. And one thing we touched on is just, he only had 2 years essentially to prepare the Eagles for the 2019 World Cup, and now he's going to have a full 4 years leading into 2023. So if you can keep that squad together and consistency that he talked about so much, look out for the Eagles. And he got me so engaged that I'm even going to cheer them on. So for our Canadian listeners, I'm sorry, but yeah, he's a great coach, and I love to see a guy on the hunt.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Robin MacDowell supporting the United States. Well, listen, the cool thing is you can support the US out every game they play, except when they obviously play your side. So I think that's fair.
Yeah, I just like to see North America successful at this point. We want to grow our game, and things go well in the US. It's a positive spin for Canada because as viewers and TV watchers, all our content comes north. So we're behind you.
So speaking of north, that side, my friend, is it true you're almost back to training in Canada? What's going on there, Makwacha?
Yeah, lots of programs across the country are being sanctioned. It's been a lot of paperwork for my program that's firing up here in the next few weeks. So little by little, clubs are popping up, programs are popping up, and rugby return to train is starting to arrive. So I'm excited about that. How about in the US?
Yeah, not so much happening here. We do have a couple of programs from the Major League Rugby side of things. I've been keeping abreast on their news. Locally, the Boston Free Jacks and then the Rugby United New York. I see here on the East Coast, they've got some clinics for young kids, so they're coming back and with limited space. But it's good to see people outside and outdoors, And then listen, Tommy, you mentioned something we spoke about earlier, some beach rugby, which I'm dearly missing from Los Angeles. You've got something on the crack that side, right?
Yeah, on the far east coast of Canada, in Nova Scotia, just north of where you are, they've been live for 2-3 weeks playing beach rugby, led by the legendary Jack Hanratty, the Canadian women's U20 coach, and he's one of the main drivers of rugby in Eastern Canada. So they've been going for 3 weeks. They have a flag rugby league on the beach, and even the legendary Brian Kelly, former Canadian media guy and now Rugby America's North media guy, is back playing. So him and his fiance moved out there, I think, a year ago, and so they partnered up with Tim Hart and Canadian International Sevens player Cooper Coates. So they got a bit of a stacked team out there. So I've been living vicariously through them, and just thrilled to see that they've been sanctioned to play downtown Halifax on the ocean. And the feedback is just so positive. So we're all living we need to stream it. We need you to commentate it.
Oh, absolutely. I love Brian Kelly. I've got a chance to commentate with him a few games. And then, of course, the media manager of Canada. It's so cool he's able to get on the beach and play some rugby. We need some footage of him scoring a couple of big 5-pointers. And you're right, I'll put some voice to that,
He actually shared some content of him scoring a try and then the slow motion of him eating sand in the corner. So it was beautiful. Good to see him mess that beautiful haircut up for once. So, Del, what's been going on the last week for you and Verity?
Yeah, we went to Boston recently, so that was really great to go into the city and check things out. Verity's teaching there at Boston University once a week now this fall, which is really cool. So I'll drive up with her, and then she'll teach a class, and I'll just be hiving it up in one of the classrooms there. There's only, I think, three classes happening on site. Everything else is remote, but really cool to be in Boston. And then this past week, I've been on a couple of podcasts, some episodes. One of them was with the Hidden Life podcast with Darren Carlson. Another one was Michael Newman for the Jewish Inspiration Foundation. And then Rugby Coffee, the pod, that one is probably your favorite one. That's with Courtney and Tinas. They've got some samples coming my way pretty soon, and then we will show you the money and send it to your side. So don't worry, you'll be javaed up soon enough. Then I also did a fun segment for the Texas Rugby Union. It's a 3-part series on Facebook and YouTube, talking more about how one gets involved in rugby commentary, what an average week looks like. And then our third episode will be fielding some questions from folks online, So a couple of one-liners going down there like a Nicolas Cage movie. And that'll happen on September 10th and the 24th, the next two. My friend, on your side, have you got any shout-outs for us for this week?
Yeah, on this side, just thrilled to be rolling out the Gilbert Rugby Canada Champions Program. Our good partners, Gilbert Rugby Canada, rolling out essentially 49 different champions and brand ambassadors from across the country, from 7 years old to coaches in their 50s and 60s. And it's all about growing the game and working together in a positive way. And so we have 6 lead ambassadors. One of our previous guests, Kayla Molesky, Brittany Ben, Karen Paquin, all stars on the Olympic Canadian Sevens team, and then 3 of the men's teams, Cooper Coates, Jake Teal, and the slipperiest of eels, Josiah Mora. And then those 6 ambassadors are actually going to help mentor all these other ambassadors. So you imagine being like 11-year-old Molly Watson in Avonlea, Saskatchewan, and being mentored by Kayla Molesky. And it's all about just that information transfer and ultimately just a positive way to grow the game. So really excited to be rolling that out, and it's been on all our socials over the last week here. How about on your side?
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, Robin. Yeah, a couple of big shout outs here. One goes to the great man, Todd Kleber, US rugby poster boy for a couple decades. A future guest of ours. It'll be on the pod pretty soon. He got engaged this week, so massive congrats to Todd and his missus. And then I want to give a big thank you to all those that have reached out to partner with us on the Rugby Hive to promote and share their business. We've got a few of those locked in soon and space for others. So make sure to hit us up on our socials at Rugby Hive on Twitter and Facebook, and at My Rugby Hive on Instagram. And then a shout out to all our followers in North America, plus Brazil, France, and South Africa, where we've cracked the top 3 most popular rugby podcasts, and that is sensational. So with that, it's time now for episode number 9.
Tafate spins around, it's over! It's a glorious score for the hooker! Advantage as he peels around, Buster at 1, still going for the line, heroic stuff! Wow! Houston, we don't have a problem Scotland do? It's Big Joe Taufete'e gets a double. This kick again back. It's ping pong. Where's Forrest Gump when you need him? McGinty goes up though and chases this one now. It's outside the 22, the ball bounces up, McGinty has it! Genius! Somerset, the Terminator is in! The United States take the lead! Now Hastings, he's got space, he fires it over the top, in the corner, Scotland go, they're over, Dougie Fife! Unbelievable scenes! He's got it in the corner! 82 minutes gone on the clock! Scotland take the moment to score in the corner, 13-29. It's all going to rest on the conversion now. Nothing the United States can do but watch and hope for their most famous victory in the modern era. Kinghorn chips this one towards the uprights. He's missed it. Kinghorn's kick goes to the side. Burns blows the whistle. The United States have defeated Scotland for the first time in history. 27 years after they lost to the Scottish 15. The number 15 team in the world has knocked off the number 6.
Today's guest is Gary Gold, a man who has coached professionally for 20 years in 4 different countries, with stints at London Irish, Newcastle Falcons, Bath and Worcester Warriors in the UK, Western Province and the Sharks in South Africa, and the Steelers in Japan. Internationally, he was the assistant coach for the Springboks, recording a rare Tri-Nations title with South Africa in 2009, as well as defeating the All Blacks on 4 occasions. He was also the assistant coach when the Springboks last played the British and Irish Lions, winning the series 2-1 back in 2009. Gold has coached the United States since 2018, winning the America's Rugby Championship with the Eagles, as well as the remarkable 30-29 win over Scotland, the first time the USA has defeated a nation inside the top 10 rankings in the professional era. In this episode, we trace Gold's entry into coaching, which people helped him guide along the way, how to become a better rugby coach, plus we look at the challenges one faces in the tough world of professional sports. We reflect on Rugby World Cup 1995, the Tri-Nations, how his Springboks defeated the All Blacks, where's rugby headed in the US, and looking ahead to Rugby World Cup 2023. Here is episode 9 with legend Gary Gold. Today's guest, one of the nicest people in rugby, a coaching resume that is almost dates back to 3-point tries. Welcome to our show, Gary.
Thanks, Dallen. Good to be here. Thank you very much.
So let's go to the current state of affairs. How are you and your family doing in Cape Town, South Africa?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Thanks. All staying fit and healthy. In many ways, wish I wasn't here. I wish I was back in the US as we were supposed to be there now. With a lot of planning and preparation for the July internationals, which are obviously not going ahead now. But otherwise, all staying healthy and fit, and just trying to use this very crazy time in the world to the very best of our abilities, and just trying to take advantage of what's a weird time. But I think in that weird time, I think it's presented all of us with, some perspective about, all aspects of life, and, just trying to milk that as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, you're spot on with that, Gary. So with all our guests, we go back into their childhood and background and what shaped them as human beings. So talk to us a bit about growing up and attending Wynberg Boys in beautiful Cape Town. Yeah,
so as you say, I went to Wynberg Boys High School, just down the road here in Cape Town. Moved down from Joburg with my folks when I was a youngster, and started a junior school. Just a very, very happy childhood, wonderful parents, and got really a fantastic opportunity to go to a school like Wynberg. I was a sports crazy individual, and as were my parents. In fact, my dad's business was a sports shop, so we had sport running through our veins. And coming from Joburg, from a very small junior school in Johannesburg, to go to a boys' school of the prestige of Wynberg Boys High was a big deal for me, and fitted right in. Enjoyed my time and experience there. Obviously playing loads of rugby and cricket and any sport I could get my hands on. And living in Cape Town and growing up here was a very privileged situation. So also a very interesting time, and going through South Africa, late apartheid years, and then thankfully post-apartheid years as well. So yeah, quite an interesting experience in life, but very many happy memories and lots of camaraderie at school and some of the stuff that you're probably not allowed to do anymore today's day and age at school. But nothing that, as I say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So
Gary, for the listeners out there, and just going from your coaching perspective, what positions did you play growing up?
I got to put it on record because I know I'm going to have a few mates who are going to rib me for this. I played hooker, but I wasn't particularly good, but I was a hooker most of my life. I think many coaches tried to make me a prop. Certainly when I played a lot more rugby leaving school, I played hooker my whole life.
And what were some of your rugby aspirations, and how far did you go in the game as an athlete?
Under the circumstances of me not being very good, I think you know, I had a wonderful time playing rugby. You know, I mean, I played at school. I managed to get 1 or 2 first team games, and I need to stress only 1 or 2 first team games, and that was a pretty big deal, considering, you know, I think when I was 16 years old, I was lucky to be making the 4th or 5th team. And it was something that I put my mind to and you know, really wanted to improve as a rugby player. But it really wasn't until I went to the army. And I went to the army for 2 years after school, and there you didn't have a choice but to get fit. I was in a young officers course as well, so we were really put through the ringer in a big way, and that coincided with me playing rugby for what was called the Defence Force at the time. And you know, that's when I really actually started to realize, hey, you know, this game is quite a fun game when you're actually properly fit and you're strong and you know how to play it. And so I had 2 years in the army, and then actually in our second year, myself and 2 friends of mine were recruited, if I could use that word, by a major in the army who was very involved in a local club down the road from us. And he managed to organize that we stopped playing for Defence and played for the club. And yeah, and then I was very privileged. You know, I spent 13 years playing club rugby here in Cape Town. Many of those years was before the game was professional. In fact, all of those years was before the game was professional. So club rugby games, you know, many games that we played, you know, I could be playing against teams like Parow or Stellenbosch where they'd have half a dozen Springboks playing against us. So, I mean, it was competitive, it was fierce, it was a huge amount of fun. I mean, you'd be playing club rugby, you know, certain games. You know, I played for, late in my career, I played for a club called Hamilton's, and there were 10, 15,000 people at a derby day, you know, when we played against villagers. So, yeah, just huge memories, a little bit of win or lose on the booze in those days. Obviously something we don't advocate as coaches now, but just massive memories, and almost irrelevant what level you played at. It was just a load of fun and a great character building. And I'd like to believe, you know, helped me very much in laying foundations for life as at that stage, a husband to be and a father to be, and hopefully a leader to be.
And speaking of leaders, Gary, let's delve into a bit your thoughts on Nelson Mandela's role in creating the Rainbow Nation and hosting the Rugby World Cup in 1995.
Yeah, Dallen, I mean, I don't even know in this lifetime if we'll ever appreciate what Madiba was about, just as a human being. You know, I don't think it's to take it lightly to say that he was a saint in so many ways. I mean, what he not only taught us as South Africans, but also the rest of the world. You know, again, I say, you know, very much like a Gandhi or one of those amazing other people, Mother Teresa, I think only in years to come will we appreciate what a special human being he was. I mean, the fact that he happened to use rugby as one mechanism to be able to unite people was quite honestly a stroke of genius, really. I mean, he realized that he had diametrically opposed people in staunch white Afrikaners who loved the game intrinsically. And then on the other side of the scale, you had previously disadvantaged black folk who had lived under an apartheid era, who couldn't stand the sight of white Afrikaners, whites, quite honestly, and let alone rugby playing whites. And I used the victory in 95 to be able to bring, you know, so many of those folks together, and not only introduce the game of rugby to folks who had never ever been exposed to that before, but to also have the sense of that we were actually, you know, we were something on the world stage. Whether it was rugby or we had a Wimbledon champion, it was irrelevant. It was more the fact that we could be taken seriously on the world stage, because quite frankly, we were the laughing stock. You know, so most of my childhood, South Africa, we were the laughing stock of the world because you had this absolutely archaic system in apartheid. So it was incredible. I mean, I was very, very privileged. I was actually at that 95 final. I was at the stadium. I was in the ground. It was something to behold. In fact, very funny story. I was right up in the top left-hand corner of the far grandstand and opposite the grandstand. And if any of you have seen rugby matches at Ellis Park, that's the stand you see. And the top left-hand corner is actually probably about 15 meters behind the dead ball line. That's how far away it is. So the field's there and the stand goes there. And I was three seats from the end. So there were two seats, two buddies of mine I was traveling with. It got me tickets to the game. And about 10 minutes before kickoff, we looked to the left-hand side and we saw the 747 coming towards the stadium. And the initial feeling, like in that row, and this guy flying the 747 was actually flying a message of good luck to the Springboks. And I actually go cold thinking of it now. And I remember looking at it and going, we're history. They're going to crash a plane into this stadium because nobody knew this plane was coming. So, and it was so low. I don't want to quote something that's not true, but he had special dispensation. I think he flew 100 meters over the stadium. 100 meters when you've got this aircraft coming from 6 kilometers away feels like it's coming straight for the stadium. And you know, that was just one memory I have of so many. And then very lucky as well. And Dallen will tell you, I mean, we both have a very good friend who I grew up with, who ended up kicking the drop goal to win it in Joel. So Joel and I have been friends ever since we met at 13 years old. So and actually managed to go out with him that night and have one or two quiet ones that evening. So it was all round. It was a very special occasion, and yeah, for the country, it was amazing. Just an amazing occurrence.
Gary, you've given us goosebumps, and I know all the listeners, can't believe it because, as you said, nobody knew that plane was flying over at that time. Like I was at the Dubai Sevens this year. There was the 50th year or whatever it was, and they told everybody in the stands, okay, there's a plane coming over, because when you could see it, you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And so that is remarkable. And so you said you met Joel at a young age. We know that. Where was that? Was that at junior school, or how did you guys meet?
Yeah. We were in a group together. We actually went to different schools. He went to Rondebosch and I went to Wynberg, but we had a common friend, another guy, mate of ours called Stephen, and they lived near each other, and so we became mutual friends from that point of view, really.
That's brilliant. Now, take us back to, how did you get involved in coaching in the first time?
I finished my playing career at a club called Villagers, just here in Cape Town, and in '97 I had an injury, and I was selected to go on a touring squad to Israel for the South African Maccabi team. And I really wanted to try and get the shoulder right. And long story short, which is far too boring for this show, it didn't necessarily come right. I went on that tour, realized it wasn't coming right. And that was in the June, July. And I thought, as I said earlier, joking aside, I wasn't a fantastic player and was quite interested in doing a little bit of long distance running, or having a look at some other avenue. And so I thought, I'm going to give the playing a little bit of a miss. And I'm going to give up. I hadn't just turned. I was 29. I was just about to turn 30. But I was really keen. I was very passionate about the club, and I loved the game. And it just so happened that at the time of me retiring or stopping from playing, the third and fourth team at Villagers had a bit of a problem, and the coaches had walked out for some reason, and the third and fourth team didn't have coaches. I said, well, I'll do it. I mean, I come down every Tuesday and Thursday in any case. So I coached the third and fourth team for the balance of that year, and it was chaotic. I mean, I didn't quite realize how difficult it was coaching the third and fourth team, and then obviously the first and second team. I'm constantly taking the players like the night before the game. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the teams did really nicely. And as I said, you were just playing around with them. That then went to a year later, or a year or so later, a friend of mine asked me to help him with the first team. Coached the first team at Villagers, and very, very surprisingly, because nobody in those days other than Stellenbosch basically won the league. We put Anton was his name, and he put a very good team together. It was all completely down to him, and recruited a really good team that was hugely competitive and ended up winning the league that year in 2000. And off the back of that, I had a sports marketing company, and I was representing a couple of players, and one of them was Brendan Venter. And Brendan had moved down to Cape Town to play for Western Province, and it was the day before the Easter weekend, and Brendan called me for a coffee, and he said, I need some help. And I said, okay, what's that? And he said, I'm going to London Irish as a coach, and I need a forwards coach. And I said to him, well, any danger? And he said, yeah, but you need a passport. And I said, well, my grandparents were British. And he said, fine. And the very next day I got a fax and with an offer, and I was very, very lucky that Brendan gave me the shot. When I say I was a rookie, that doesn't begin to explain how raw I was as a coach. I've been coaching for 18 months maybe and done one full year of the first team. Amazed to know how little I did know when I went into professional coaching. But I can't say enough about Brendan as a mentor and a friend. And he was already an established Springbok. He had come to Cape Town for his last couple of years as a pro rugby player. And then because he had a stint at London Irish, he wanted to go back there as a player coach. And it was just a next level experience. Moved my very young family. My daughter was 3 months old. And my wife, we moved to London. And we spent 5 years there. Yeah, and it was incredible. And that was the start of my coaching career. You know, again, I'll never ever take for granted how lucky I was and what an unbelievable privilege it was. And I can't say thanks enough, especially to people like Brendan who gave a young guy a chance. And so I'm very, very aware whenever we come across young coaches or I speak at a seminar or I meet young coaches, I'm acutely aware what passion and desire and at that stage, lack of knowledge somebody will have. Again, you're not going to gain that knowledge until you get that opportunity. So that was the beginning of my coaching career. And I'm very, very lucky that I actually managed to go with a guy who was such a great teacher. I mean, the lessons I learned from Brendan and the knowledge and the in-depth knowledge and the hours and hours and hours of debates. And Brendan made me do things that I don't see coaches doing today. I mean, he literally made me do certain things that gave me the opportunity to be able to feel that I could stand on my own 2 feet a few years later.
What kind of things did he give you or push you to do?
God's honest, true story. The thing that was the most impactful, bar none, was analysis. But it was, we're talking 2000 now, 2001. And so there were no fancy digital analysis systems on computers. I mean, we barely had a computer in those days. You were very lucky if you even had a Windows computer and you could do an Excel spreadsheet on it. And so what happened is we had a little container. It was our office was a made-up container, and we predominantly played on Sundays because we played at the Majeski Stadium and they had soccer there on the Saturday, so we would play rugby on the Sunday. So we'd come home with my family after a game where we've played in Reading, and we had a quick dinner, and then I'd go off to the office. And Brendan said to me, I had to do the stats. And that literally was a VHS video machine that instead of having the remote control had a button that I could do that and do that, which basically made the tape go at whatever speed I wanted it to go at. I had a piece of A4 paper, which was a spreadsheet, which had the players' names down the left-hand side, and then whatever piece of information we wanted. So his ball carries, the effectiveness of his ball carries, his clean-outs, the effectiveness of his clean-outs, and maybe what arrivee he was, tackles and the effectiveness of his tackles, and maybe one or two other predominant factors like, did he create a penalty or concede a penalty? Did he create a turnover, concede a turnover? Did he get a line break, or was there a piece of magic? And those were across the top. And I had a pencil in my hand that I used to sharpen under the desk. And I literally used to sit there, and it used to take me up to 6 hours a game to do these stats. And Brendan wanted them at 9 o'clock the very next morning to present to the players. So I would literally take Ryan Strudrick and ball carry, very effective, a little dot, and then go back and review the video. And who was the first cleaner? Rob Hardwick, effective clean. Yes, he removed the threat, little dot. Second cleaner, Simon Helford, very effective. To go back, end of the breakdown, effective pass from 9 to 10, yes. And then literally add up all the dots. And it was the most incredible learning curve. As much as I dreaded spending until literally, and you can call my wife and she's right next door, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning until I got home, slept for 4 or 5 hours, and was up the next morning to go to work and present the guys with their stats. And in those days, it was interesting because you'd have a player come and say to me, I didn't make 10 tackles. I'm sure I made more tackles, but I didn't have the technology to go back on the game and say, well, hang on, let's just, where did you make that tackle? Bottom left-hand corner. She said, how am I going to go through the whole VHS again and find out where that tackle is? But what it did do is when you then got to sit down with a player and do a one-on-one with a player, and it was a clean out, or it was a piece of a fantastic lift at a line out where the front jump supporter wasn't there, and he held him in the air for that extra second, and you as a coach noticed that and mentioned that to the player, he was like, well, hang on a second. I wouldn't have thought anybody would have seen that. So there's a big credibility issue there as well. And again, from my point of view, when I say how little I knew from a coaching point of view in terms of technical and tactical aspects, we knew how to play the game, but in terms of breaking it down to the chess of rugby, when you start to study that and you start to see in these incremental moments so often what a player does, you start to really appreciate what world-class players look like and the amount of contributions that they make in a game. Even as an ex-player myself, I'd look back and go, that's incredible, you know. And I've seen that later in life with players like Richie McCaw, Skulkberger, you know, even a guy like Luke Watson. I mean, the work rate that a guy like Luke could go through, or Skulk particularly, was incredible. You know, you get to appreciate that, Rob. So it was, but I mean, it's one of the things I say to coaches today, you know, just go and take 20 minutes of footage and do a thorough analysis on it with all the new gizmos that you can have today. But it's a learning curve. You can't get that from university.
Yeah, and although I've been coaching internationally for 7 years for Mexico and Canada, and I coach every day, every program, and you know, obviously working with the Canadian women now, we have a lot of technology, but I'm very old fashioned. People always say, what do you need when I get flown across the US or wherever? And I need cones and balls, and that's all I need. So I haven't been gifted with that technology, but just listening to you, having to go through that is, like you say, as painful as that process was back then. And now everything's just coded and it's sweet and it's delivered on your desk. The process, and it's the same with our athletes. Like, they got to go through those skills and be meticulous in their skill acquisition and development. There's no secret. There's no secret shortcut to success or understanding the game. It's going through it play by play, and then you know that must have changed the way you look at the game forever.
Yeah, and I the truth is, I don't think I would have done that voluntarily, because I wouldn't have known. You know, if it wasn't for Brendan tasking me with that and making me do that, that was my job as his assistant coach. It was one of the things I had to do. I mean, Brendan, being the type of individual he is, literally ran the rugby show on his own. I mean, I oversaw scrums, and because I think I knew a bit about scrums as a hooker, and I had some very good players in the line-out, and they ran it and you oversaw it. So I had to add value somewhere, and it was literally eye-opening. I mean, if there is a silver bullet, that is it as a young coach. And that's why, interestingly enough, young analysts will make such good coaches. I mean, I have always had a very strong bond with my analysts, because I know what finite detail they know of the game that I know assistant coaches don't know, because they haven't done the work or put the hours in. So they're very valuable individuals, but it's a huge learning curve for a young coach.
Gary, quick story for you. So I was busy cleaning up my place here. I had a bit of time on my hands, seeing as there's no sports on the go. And what did I pull up? I pulled up a bunch of old South African SA rugby magazines, and I'd torn out a few pages that I wanted to keep as a youngster. And it was called Gary Gold's Playbook. And it's your one page that you submitted every magazine issue of, and Robin, it's a strategy play. It could be a line-out, set piece, scrum. And I kept all those because I remember as a youngster going, oh, wow, I just loved how this coach broke the game down. And I want to use this as a coach later. And I did. I used this when I coached here in America. And I just want to say that it's remarkable you speak about the stats to keep, but then you actually translated that, obviously, to share that with the world. And I think that's not done enough. People don't want to share what they know. But I just want to say, from a young age, I remember you just being such a great strategist.
No, thanks, Dallen. I appreciate that. Yeah, I remember those playbooks very well. They took hours to put together, but they were a lot of fun. And I think on the sharing thing, you make a very valid point. I mean, there's a very incorrect perception that, there's IP you're going to have that nobody else knows, even if you, Rob, you get to feel that when you do put in the hours, and you get slightly resentful of coaches who don't put in the hours, or a young coach who wants to come down and film on his phone a drill that you're doing, and then he wants to go copy it. But that's not really where the value lies. The value lies in having a thorough understanding himself to be able to present it to the group, so the group can get a buy-in on that. So I think what I'm trying to say, Dylan, is sharing is something I certainly have learned from the best coach, Brendan being one of them, Wayne Smith being another. The very best coaches in the world really actually don't have an issue in sharing. And I think that's quite enlightening, because really they've probably forgotten what you've still got to learn. So, the issue is not in a drill here or the sequence. So the sharing is really important, particularly in rugby, because we're still an adolescent sport. If you think about it, I mean, we only really turned professional in 1997. So we're still young and, certainly in the States, growing hugely.
Yeah, I've got a number of mentors, class guys, and they always give me the, and it's we never talk about playbooks or special lineouts or anything too fancy. It's literally around culture and behaviors and just man management. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Outside of Venter, who are some of your other mentors, or over the years have been your mentors?
I've been so lucky, I've worked with so many amazing people. I mean, when I finished the London Irish gig, the guy who got me back to South Africa was Nick Mallett. Nick is a larger-than-life character, really, really smart man, huge intellect, huge passion, vivacious, difficult guy. I mean, if you're on the wrong side of him, no question of a doubt, but he was fantastic to work with and to work for. I spent quite a lot of time with Alan Solomons when I was a youngster, actually even before my professional coaching era. He gave me an opportunity from a marketing point of view, ironically enough, at the Stormers. I learned so much from him, again, around, Rob, what you're saying about the man management and that Stormers team under Bob Skinstead and Cornet Kricher and Brady and, that amazing team that he managed. It was unbelievable to see how he managed those personalities, reminded me so much of the task that we've all just been watching now when you watch The Last Dance, and what an amazing coach the Chicago Bulls had in Phil, and how he must have had to really paddle carefully through those waters of having so many strong personalities and talented individuals. So Solly was a huge inspiration for me. I got to work with Rassie for a number of years, actually, at the Stormers and then at the Springboks. He was a fantastic guy to work with and absolutely inspirational. Again, a completely different dynamic. And then, I've had a very strong friendship with Wayne Smith over the years. We coached each other when I was at London Irish and Wayne was at Northampton. We played them in the Power Gen Cup final at Twickenham and met him then. And then our paths crossed again so many times. I mean, we played Super Rugby against each other, and then we played international rugby against each other when I was assistant coach in Springboks and he was assistant coach of the All Blacks. And we've remained friends ever since then. And the irony of all ironies is he's doing what I used to do at Kobe. He's now taken over at Kobe. So it's amazing how your paths cross so often with so many great people. But, I mean, that's to name a few. I feel really bad if I've forgotten somebody off the list. Even a good friend of mine like Anton Chait, even though we were colleagues, I mean, Anton was so much more of a better player. He had such a better vision, and even he was, very much a mentor to me. But many guys. Peter de Villiers in my time at the Springboks was a really fantastic individual, a wonderful human being as well. And we learned a lot from him. But, the players, some of the players that I've worked with have been mentors to me as well. Again, the maturity of a player who's got 80, 90 test caps, when you haven't coached a lot of international rugby, you might be 15 years older than him, but you've not been in that arena, in that environment, So, the value that John Smith and Victor and Juan and Skulk and Jacques Fourie and Jean de Villiers and Farid Dupree, I mean, this is how ridiculous this list is of the team that we had. It would be amazing to work with those guys and in a different aspect, whether you're doing a one-on-one with them or whether you're watching Victor run a line-out or Juan talking about contesting for whatever it was, all big mentors in one way, shape or form.
Let's talk about that Springbok side that you coach. You mentioned all those brilliant players and working with Peter de Villiers. It was around about the cycle leading up to the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Tell us about the pressure, though. South Africa's rugby public and newspapers and everybody is very critical and pretty mad. What was that side of the game like for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was roller coaster doesn't even begin to describe it. I mean, it was, we were appointed under a very dark cloud. We were appointed, I was in New Zealand with the Stormers at the time, playing Super Rugby, and I got called and said, can I, literally in the night before in South Africa, which was the day in New Zealand, can I go to a call at 1:00 in the morning, New Zealand time? They shuffled me into a studio to do a call like this, but in those days, the technology wasn't like it is at the moment now. And I went into for that interview, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and all I could barely see was the boardroom at SA Rugby. And this was on the back of South Africa having just won the 2007 Rugby World Cup, and controversially, Jake not having his contract renewed. And I knew that Peter was strongly in line to get the job. In fact, I think he already did have the job. And somebody he wanted to be assistant coach said, no, I'm not going with Peter. So I was actually second choice, the truth be told. And so I went for this interview. And so when we got the job, we got it under a very dark cloud, like who is Peter de Villiers? Who is Gary Gold? Who is Dick Muir? Dickie was probably the most highly sought of coach that we knew because he was coaching the Sharks and they got to the Super Rugby final that year. So, and being an ex-Springbok as well. So Peter and myself were not ex-Springboks. And it was doom and gloom for South African rugby. It was absolutely, we were done and dusted. And John had moved overseas to Claremont. Victor had gone to Toulon. Farid had gone to Japan. Pretty much the 2007 squad was decimated. Handful of the guys were really upset that Jake hadn't taken over. And we started 2008 not so well. We got hammered in the Tri-Nations that year. And it was like, this is going to be the coaching staff that's got the shortest period of time to live. And it was hell. It really was. I remember we played a test against Australia in Bloemfontein. Australia came out of the blocks firing, and the coach's box was right up at the top of the stand. And walking down, we were being spat at, physically spat at by people. And I just thought to myself, this is like, we had to take off our Springbok blaze, and some of us were trying to protect Pete in front of us as well. And ironically enough, Victor had scored a chip and chase, actually. He had scored a try right on the stroke of halftime. We were 20 points down. As I say, we were being abused. Went in at halftime, everybody was cool, calm, and collected, came out and actually got into the lead again, and it was only a Kurtley Beale penalty on the stroke of full time, thanks to Wayne Barnes, that he kicked the goal and we lost by a point. And then after that, things turned quite favourably in our favour, and we managed to get a couple of the guys back, or Pete managed to get a couple of guys back from overseas. And then we started to win. But at that stage, I thought, well, hang on, what was supposed to, as a young kid dreaming to one day be an international coach, let alone to coach your own country, this is hell on earth. But it changed. You have to adapt. You have to stick to the process and understand that, you aspire to things for a specific reason, and there are going to be very dark days. And very, very dark days, where you think like you want to just chuck it all in. And that's pretty much what happened, for our full 4 years. It ebbed and flowed. But I think in hindsight, I think it's safe to say there were a hell of a lot more positives than there were negatives over the 4 years. And, there are quite a lot of records that have, still stand today that over that 4-year tenureship. It was a wonderful team. And again, I know I've said it before, but I never ever want to be unappreciative for, the luck that life has. But, to get a group of players like that was just incredible. Such a talented group of players, and it was fun to work with them.
I love to hear your emotion and excitement with those experiences. What was it like coaching against the prestigious British Lions? And your side recorded a 2-1 victory in that series. What was that like?
Yeah, so that was interesting. South Africa are in a very similar position right now. So Rugby World Cup champions, and then the Lions coming to visit them straight after that. And so it's interesting, Rob. Again, not a lot of people in the US or in Canada understand the magnitude of this, but there's a Rugby World Cup every 4 years where everybody aspires to go to a Rugby World Cup, but the Lions come around every 12 years. So the amount of players in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand who have played against the Lions twice in their life in a series, you could probably count on one hand. I can't think of somebody off the top of my head. If Frans Steyn plays now, Francie would be one player that I can think of, but other than that, Dallen would know better than me, but, you can count them on one hand. It's highly unlikely that you're going to play somebody, then 12 years later, you're still playing at the top of your game, and the British and Irish Lions come along. And it's a big deal. It really is a big deal. And I think what happened is through Pete's leadership, we managed to get this wave of enthusiasm about, hey, you guys have been to a World Cup, and you've won a Tri-Nations, and you've achieved everything you can achieve, which can happen either every year or every 4 years. But what are you going to do every 12 years? And in 97, we lost the series 2-1. South Africa lost the series 2-1 to a Jeremy Gaska drop goal. So that still hurt. and the one thing the Brits do very well is rub your face in it. So they were very clear in letting you know that we had lost the last series, and it was a big deal, for a lot of those senior players. This was their last dance. This was their last. They wanted to put the cherry on the top of achieving everything on the world stage, and it was just. I'm not often at a loss for words, but to go through that series, to see the magnitude of what the Lions meant, to see the travelling supporters. And again, I want to publicly say this and be incorrect, but there was one piece of information that was doing its rounds, is that the Soccer World Cup was in 2010 in South Africa, as many of you well know, and the British and Irish Lions came to South Africa in 2009. And that the supporter group from the 2009 British and Irish Lions brought in more gross domestic funds than the entire Soccer World Cup did in 2010. That's how big the following was, and the magnitude of and obviously it's over a much longer period of time than a Soccer World Cup. It was over, 6 weeks, and there were many more games, and the supporters could come out, and it's an easy flight from the northern, from the UK down to South Africa. But it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing on that first Test match to walk out to Kings Park and just see this entire stand just red from corner to corner, every single seat taken, and the noise and the theatre. The theatre was amazing, and just to be a very small part of that, and then obviously to have enjoyed. I think they were two absolutely epic Test matches. The third Test match was a little bit of a dead rubber for many reasons that we don't have to go into, but I mean, mainly because we had won the series already. So, but yeah, the first two Test matches were on an absolute knife edge, and could have gone either way. But it was a life-changing experience. Unbelievable.
Speaking of life-changing experiences outside of the Lions, beating the All Blacks, as a South African fan, a South African population, is the greatest ever. Tell us about technically preparing to play New Zealand, and you were involved in 3 rare victories in the same year against them in 2009 Tri-Nations.
Yeah, I mean. It was a weird scenario. We actually were involved in 4, because it was the 2008 one in Carisbrooke, and then from there, even though it was a bounce of a ball and a piece of genius from Ricky, we won 30-28 or 30-29, I think it was, and that sort of gave the group a bit of confidence. I don't think John could play that game for some reason. Victor was the captain, and then Victor got yellow carded, and it was just so many weird things that happened. And New Zealand never having ever lost at Carisbrooke in a Test match, let alone to Springboks. It was the 100th Test match played at Carisbrooke, so there was a big deal about it. I'll never forget, every single shop in Dunedin, windows were blacked out on the week of the Test. You didn't have a mannequin, you didn't have anything in the stores except for all black, and it was an amazing experience, and that gave us the confidence to then go into 2009 on the back of also beating the British and Irish Lions. We were a very powerful team and very confident in the way we were doing. We also did hit an All Blacks team that were struggling to find their identity. Post-2007, they had gone back to the drawing books a little bit. It was the time of the ELVs, if you remember. So what we did is, as a group, as a collective group, is we sat down and we thought, like, to ourselves technically, which what you asked me, Del, is what was our point of difference? What is something... We knew we were a very good rugby team. We had extraordinarily talented rugby players, but what style of play did we think we could use that could hurt the All Blacks the most? In other words, what did they not want to face? And at the time of the ELVs and free kicks, etc., it was very much a game of territory and suffocate and strangle. So we knew that they had Rakakoko and Sivivatu as the wings. They weren't wanting to turn and be retrieving kicks in behind them. And so we used a very strong either box kick from Farid Apria or tactical kicks from initially Ruan Pino as the 10 and then became Mornay Stain, and how we basically took these big wingers and we turned them into the corners where they didn't have a kicking game to return and they were going to run. And then we just had this massive green wall, 13, sometimes even 14 in the front line. And we literally just went for them. Sometimes we picked 2 open sides, which is the time that Heinrich Rousseau really made his name. And he was, I don't want to use bad language here as a metaphor, but he was, you can imagine how he was all over that ball. And we literally just sent fetches in over that ball. And then it was penalty after penalty and just kept the scoreboard ticking over. And it was at a time where I say this with all the best respect, only for a short period of time, but I think at that moment in time, I don't think the All Blacks had an answer. And in some things that you've seen, if it's all or nothing or whatever it is, if you see or read stories about the dynasty, the All Blacks dynasty, I think that 2009 year, post 2007 was important for them, but that 2009 year under Ted and Graham Henry and Steve Hansen and Wayne Smith, how they changed quite a lot about the New Zealand culture and the New Zealand team, and what they did in terms of being able to take the game to another level, and the rest is history about how they did do that. So technically and tactically, I mean, we had a team who were full of confidence, which, if you could bottle confidence, we all wouldn't be in rugby at the moment, but because it's so powerful. But it was just like, literally, it was a tsunami of a wave of confidence that we had. And we believed in what we were doing. And it was made easier, I must stress as well, because I hate these type of scenarios where it's ever perceived that anybody's taking credit here, where it's undue. But the Bulls had also formulated that game plan during the course of that Super Rugby year, where they also played very much of a territory-based game. And, it was the advice that we got from a Victor and a Fourie and a Brian and the guys in the Donny and Bucky's, the guys who came from the Bulls, that served us to say, listen, guys, this is how we played Super Rugby this year and did pretty darn well in suffocating and strangling these New Zealand teams. So we adopted that to a large degree, but again, with better players, and everybody bought into it. So it was a magnificent time. I mean, and they were test matches that, the first couple, the one in Durban, the one in Bloem, they weren't even close. I mean, we hammered them. And obviously the final game in Hamilton to win the Tri Nations that year was a hell of a game of rugby. I mean, it could have gone either way. And again, if you ever go and look at the Carter's very last kick of the day of the play in the 81st minute, he kicks that this much further in, and Richie catches it unopposed and scores, and we lose the game, potentially the Tri Nations. And literally, how many times in your life do you see Dan Carter just overcook a kick, and he overcooked it by this much, and everyone's forgotten about that today. And we would have lost that and probably not won the Tri Nations.
That's why we have the insight there. But I'll never forget that 09 season, as you mentioned, because the strategy had changed and it worked for South Africa, and it was phenomenal because, just as an outside fan of the sport, you get tired of seeing one team win the whole time, the All Blacks. And so it was really good to see South Africa come through. And so great insight. But Gary, you as a coach, right, you traveled a lot, you moved over a lot. So for a period of about 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, you spent time with the Newcastle Falcons, Bath, Worcester in England, and then you were with the Steelers in Japan, Sharks in South Africa. Just moving once can be very stressful. So what was that time period like for you and your family?
No, it was a very difficult time. So often, if I have an opportunity to speak to coaches, or I'm asked to speak about it, it's really important as well to highlight that it's not the glamour life you see 1% of the very best coaches in the world on television, like a Rassie or Wayne Smith or Eddie, of that caliber coach who's winning, Six Nations or World Cups. There's all the rest of us who are the other 99% who are trying to make a living, doing what we love, trying to be as good as we possibly can. But, curveballs come in life, and certainly wasn't my strategy at all to move around. I had been at London Irish for 5 years. I was then with Western Province for another 5 years, which overlapped the Springboks, which was a 4-year period. And so for the first 10 years of my life, I literally had 2 jobs, if you exclude the fact that I then got appointed to the Springboks. And longevity was the thing of what I wanted. But unfortunately, things went very pear-shaped at Bath in a very short period of time, completely unexpected. And, that led to a lot of different factors, taking into consideration my young kids and how often can you move them around and change schools. And I've got my son is on the autistic spectrum, so it heightened that even more so that I can't take him out of his comfort zone. And that meant that, as the breadwinner, I was going to have to go out and do what I did. And, so post Bath, I got this opportunity to go to Japan, and then the family moved back to South Africa, close to my wife's family, and go back to some form of normality for the family. And, and then was at Japan, where I had an amazing time, absolutely loved Japan. But then I got a call from John and asked, would I be consider going back to the Sharks? And again, you're humbled by that as an opportunity, and it means I'm closer to home and can coach in Super Rugby again. And you have sleepless nights in those decisions because you're loyal to the club that have given you an opportunity, and you want to do the right thing, and you want to be ethical. And went back to the Sharks, and that lasted for a couple of years, and then they had a change in management, and we had a change in philosophy, and that's the moving target. So it's incredibly difficult. I mean, it's not glamorous. It's not glamorous at all. It's what you have to do. And then I actually had a completely different shift in my ideas, and that was that I was largely going to be based, with the family, and I was going to do consultation work, and that's what Worcester was. Worcester was a consultation project to go and help them whilst they were in relegation, and no one was going to get fired. I'm just going to go in there, offer my 5 cents worth, hopefully add some value, and it ended up working out really well, and we avoided relegation relatively easily at the end of the day after being in a world of pain at one stage. And then that flips everything on its head again, because then the next minute they're going, well, hang on a second, you've got to come and take a job. And that coincided with the same time that the USA opportunity came about, and I got approached about that. I think I always had a desire to want to get back into international rugby. And I think if I look back at it, Dallen, in terms of the clubs that you mentioned, for some sadistic reason, I have this desire to want to go to the underdog. I like going to places where people say to me, you can't make a difference, or you're not going to make a difference. And I love that challenge, because I have a huge amount of belief in the human spirit and bringing people together. And that's what I think I love most about rugby, other than watching people scoring free-flowing tries, which is all lovely and romantic. I like the grind, I like the grind and coming from behind. And I saw a little bit of that in the USA thing, and it coupled with the appetite I still had to want to get involved in international rugby. And so, as I say, the rest is history.
Well, you're just burrowing your way into my heart, because as a small Canadian rugby player, playing on the international scene, and Dallen, playing for the U.S., obviously, we were in our era definitely underdogs, and my time with Mexico, you couldn't ask for more of an underdog. So I think if I had it easy, I wouldn't know what to do. But you're right. It's all about the grind. And as much as we like to complain about it on the long late nights or the early mornings or the hundreds of hours of flights a year, we're lost without it as well, right? We got to be on the trail. So how has your coaching philosophy and outlook and development shaped with having experienced coaching in 4 different countries?
I think tremendously, whilst maybe at the time, Rob, I don't understand it. One very quick example I can give you is coaching in Japan is if you're a young aspiring coach, one of the things I'd say is a tick box exercise, go and coach in a country where it's not your language. Because the one thing you will learn very, very quickly is to get a message across a hell of a lot simply in a hell of a lot fewer words, because it's not your home language. And that was a huge learning curve for me. Not only was it not my language, it wasn't a type of language like potentially French or German that I could pick up, because an A is an A in French and German, even though it sounds differently. This is completely different. You are going to coach 100% of your time with an interpreter. So you don't have more time. It's not as if you can take your 30-minute team meetings and all of a sudden make them an hour because he's got to talk and I've got to talk. So you've got to say what you've got to say in that 30 minutes with an interpreter. And you want to share the passion, and they're culturally different. And so it's a huge learning curve. And literally finding myself preparing for a session the next day going, right, what are the 2 or 3 most important things I need to get across here? Because clearly what I'd like to say, I'm not going to get across. So what are the 2 or 3 most important things? And even now, I've just found this lockdown period and COVID has made me really look within and see the areas, whether it was feedback from the Rugby World Cup or a 360 analysis that I grabbed out of the bottom drawer that I managed to find in some filing cabinet, to go and have a look and say, gee, people have said, you're not very good at that, and you're not very good at that, and, you can improve that, and, gone away and really re-looked at that, and looked at my whole philosophy around that. So I think the fact that you've been able to travel and not only just mix with different cultures, and even though the game is still the same game, it's really different how you give the messages across to different people. And I think it's even though that might have been by default as opposed to design, I think it's gone a long way in terms of helping me, hopefully become better at what I do, or hopefully get the message across in a better way.
And I think all your tools definitely set you up for success. Now, you took over the head coaching role with the U.S. back in 2018. What excites you the most about coaching in America? We all know, just as the neighbors looking over the fence to the north, that the tidal wave of success has already started, and and where do you see it going?
I think, obviously, without quoting the obvious, I think it's around the potential. And again, I'm going to give you, instead of quoting the boring cliches that we're all frustrated with hearing about what the potential of USA is about, I think I'd rather give you an example of what I've seen and lived and touched and felt myself, and that is Japan. Going to Japan at the time, when I arrived in Japan in the beginning of 2014, end of 2013 actually, beginning of 2014, I saw a game that wasn't anything to write home about. The club game wasn't particularly good. The national game was particularly bad. Eddie was already working his magic at that time and was really fighting particularly hard with the JRFU to be able to try and professionalize it. But the bottom line is the players were owned by companies. They weren't contracted. They were employed. You worked for your company. So you worked for Honda and you played rugby for them by the bar. So where we were at Kobe, I had to plan training sessions around when the guys had to go to work, because ultimately the rugby was just a marketing tool. They were always going to work for Kobe Steel, and they were going to go back to work when they finished playing rugby. So that's their priority. And the Japanese culture is that's how it is. It's not negotiable. So they had all the odds against them to be able to be a successful team. They literally at national level had zero money. And at a club game, the club game wasn't really, it wasn't even club versus country. They didn't even sit in the same room. It wasn't even a conversation that happened. The club game was the club game and the country game was the country game. Eddie obviously did a huge amount to break down those barriers. And coming from a club of Suntory's size, he knew how to navigate those waters. But even so, I can categorically tell you now that the club game when I started in Japan was worse than where the MLR is at the moment now. Categorically. The MLR is of a much better standard than when the club game was at that stage. There were 2 or 3 teams who were very good and very competitive. Kobe won, Toshiba was one, Panasonic was one, Suntory was one. The rest, nowhere. And you were winning some games by 50, 60, 70 points for fun against what they were called top 8 teams. But to see that metamorphosis, and granted, World Rugby helping them with money did make a huge difference, but the ability for Eddie and then at a later stage, Jamie Joseph, to mold that group and spend the time that they did together. And I think nobody would be offended if I said this, they're not born and blessed with athleticism of what you can have in America, for example. No country is, but Japan particularly not. For example, I don't think it's a rude thing to say, but they're not blessed with height. We had one of the second rows who played for Japan, a guy called Soji. He was 6 foot on the dot and struggled to be one gram more than 100 kilograms. And he played second row for Japan. And he was flipping outstanding. But that's what he was. And they didn't have 6'6", 6'7", 6'8" locks, roaming the parks and playing rugby on a regular basis. And so that's the challenges that they had, and they rose to those challenges. So you don't even want to get me started on the potential of, if we become aligned as an organization, if we become aligned in terms of our Pathways project and our developing our youth game, very much like what you guys are doing with Jamie in Canada, which is where I think America better be peeking over the fence north, because what you're doing with the Pacific Pride and putting a program like that together is going to deliver on dividends very, very quickly. And so I think to answer your question, sorry about the long-windedness, but is just the potential of being able to grow and build this US team, very much like Mike and the guys have done in sevens, and you guys would know that very well, how over an extended period of time the sevens group have grown and grown and grown, and now they are genuine medal potential hopefuls at Olympic Games. I'd very much like to put hopefully we have put the wheels in motion for that from a rugby point of view. And bit of a setback from the Rugby World Cup last year, very, very disappointing, very disappointed with our performances and by our own standards. And again, being in the pool of death is not an excuse. I think I said it during the World Cup, we can't cry for 4 years leading up to a World Cup wanting tier 1 competition. And then when we have 3 teams of that caliber in the same pool, we can't moan about that. We should be embracing that. So I think that was a bump in the road, but, something that I think we're all going to learn a huge amount from. And it's great to see how far we've come, but it's fantastic to see how far we still got to go if we are ever going to be competitive with those teams. But I think the potential is very exciting.
Yeah, Gary, that's so great to hear. Particularly a lot of comparisons with that Super League in Japan when that started many years ago. We touched on the World Cup 2019, but let's touch on one special evening we had with you. We had a outside of the barbecue, a couple of cool drinks, and Jacques Fourie was there, Andries Becker. Those are players that played for you. And those fans that don't know, Jacques Fourie scored the winner against the British and Irish Lions in that 2009 team we spoke about. What was it like catching up with him, Joel, and guys like that at such a cool event?
Yeah, and it was so special. I mean, we were based in Kobe, on the other side of town, and Andries had dropped me a message saying, his nickname for me is Old Man. So he said, "Hello, old man. Are we going to be able to get together?" And I've got this teppanyaki little restaurant that he wanted to take us to, and it was quite literally a hole in the wall in Kobe. And literally, you lifted up the shutters and you wheeled out the barrels, and you cooked Kobe beef on there. And it was amazing because what he had actually done is he had arranged for the whole club, all the Japanese players, to come and join us and say hello. So as you remember, Del, I mean, a whole lot of the players came from the club, and there were one or two guys who had even retired at that stage. And so it was very special, And I mean, I think, through all those dark days that we talk about and how many, downs you have during a coaching career and when things don't go well and God forbid you lose your job or you're just getting a hard time in the media, that makes it all worthwhile when a handful of years later, players that you worked with actually want to come back and come and see you and shake your hand and come and say hello. So it was a very emotional evening that for me, actually, not only being back in Kobe again and obviously with the USA team, but to see all those guys that I didn't even know if I was ever going to see them again. If I was ever going to go back to Japan. When I left Japan, I didn't know if I was ever going to return there, let alone back to Kobe, let alone back to see those guys. So, and that's the beauty with rugby. I'm sure there are other sports who have it as well, but I don't think to the significance of rugby is that, we absolutely cross every boundary. Men or women, doesn't matter what age you are, what sex you are, what color you are, what religion you are, we cross boundaries, because of this camaraderie that we have in this amazing sport of ours. And whether you're tall and fast or fat and slow and strong, there's a place for you in rugby. And because of that, I think it draws people together. So, evenings like that are very special, and they mean a lot. Pity about the result the next day though, but the evening before was a lot of fun.
Now, you touched on some of your results at the 2019 World Cup, but from a coaching aspect, essentially you only took over in 2018, so you didn't get the full cycle. But I'm sure 2018, 2019 gave you a good outlook and awareness of the landscape in U.S. and obviously the team. And then obviously it was a good test to see what we got to work on. Looking ahead to getting be part of the full cycle leading into the 2023 World Cup, what are some of your personal goals and program goals with the full build-up?
I mean, I think I alluded a little bit to it earlier. One of the things I'd really like to see be driven and be given a huge amount of priority in the US post-COVID, obviously, because everything's gone on a little bit of a shutdown at the moment, is everything around the community game. And when I mean the community game, I mean the grassroots game, the club game, the university game, whether it's a big university, or it's a big Ivy League university, a big rugby university, or it's just a small integrated university, to just have some form of an identity where we can really get a strong pathways program where kids from right across the country, which obviously is a massive country, but where we can do a much better job than has been done in the past of bringing those kids through, seeing the youngsters of USA rugby, and obviously at this moment I'm only talking about the men's, but for the women as well, be able to compete at junior World Cup competition, under 20 competitions, and actually be competitive there, not just make up the numbers. And there's challenges with that. I mean, there's no magic wand for that. That's not going to happen easily. And there's big challenges within the States and Canada around that, because the college program has such a wonderful priority over those kids as well. So it's not without its challenges, but to be able to really see the youth game grow, and from that then be able to see us developing American players through the pipeline and hopefully see those guys. And then that's from the bottom up, and then from the top down, literally keep some form of consistency with the team that went to 2019 World Cup. I envisage 70-75% of those guys could be available in 4 years' time, and marry that with the excitement of what's going on with MLR. So we've put a huge amount of time and energy and resources now into our knowledge of the MLR, and our depth chart and monitoring every single player who's playing MLR at the moment. And so that at any one time, any US qualified player were to pick up the phone and say, hey, how am I doing? I want to be able to answer him. And I feel we're getting there. I think we very well on our way to be able to do that. And, use the MLR in a very positive way to also be developing the players and giving them an opportunity to play for their country. And I think if we get that groundswell on both fronts going, and coupled with the fact that we can hopefully be continue to be in a highly professional environment with people like the great assistant coaches that I had and the S&C coaches and the analysts that I have, to continue to be giving this IP and this incredible value to the players. And when they come into camp, they feel, wow, this is a learning environment. This is a huge learning environment. And it's an environment where I think we're going to get better and we can actually compete with people on the world stage. And so that the Scotland result is not just a flash in the pan and the Samoa result is not a flash in the pan, that it's something we feel we can consistently do and go toe-to-toe. And we're not going to beat the best countries in the world yet, but we want to go toe-to-toe with them and be able to feel that, we've done what we can do to be able to be as competitive as we can. And then, dare I say it, by the next time we get to a Rugby World Cup, let's hopefully fire a few shots.
Yeah, I think the world is waiting for those shots. They've seen it in sevens, and as you mentioned, in 15s against Scotland. We can't wait, from a personal point of view. Gary, you've traveled a lot. Do you have one humorous story to tell us about one of your tours or travels?
It's a difficult story actually because it's slightly involved in the Afrikaans language, and so I'll try and explain it to you. But basically, what happened is we were dealing with it was before the British National Lions, and I decided that what we'd do is we'd do a SWOT analysis, so the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for all these players. Very simply put, I just wanted to sit down with the player and say to him, listen, what do you think your strengths are? And can we improve on that? And what do you think your weaknesses are? And, do you want to work on them? And, I'm very much of a coach who believes in just focus on your strengths, because that's the reason why you're in the team. There's a point of difference why you're in the team. And unfortunately, that conversation got a little bit lost in translation, literally got lost in translation, because I got the players to fill out a form and it was, what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, and what's your threats, and what's your opportunities. I explained what I meant by that. And when I got the forms back in my room that night, I was going through them and I was really impressed by the effort the players put in. I mean, these are seasoned veterans. They don't need to be answering a question from, some kippy assistant coach. And I had some great insights. Victor told me what his strengths are, John told me what his strengths are, and Beast told me what his strengths are. And then when I got to Bucky's page, next to strengths, he just wrote yes. And and to put that in perspective, strength directly translated into Afrikaans means, are you strong? And he said, yes, no, I'm strong. I feel very strong today. That's now. And but again, when I tell that story in a full translation, it has the full might of if I tell it in a South African audience, people understand what it was meant. So when I sat down in the one-on-one with him, I said, Bucky's, I see you said, yes, I'm just training. He said, yes, coach, I feel strong. I'm good. So I said, okay, I'm very happy to hear. And I've never had the courage to explain to him what I really meant. But if he was feeling strong, I was feeling strong, which is always good.
A strong Buckies would punish the opposition. The English and Afrikaans is definitely one that gets confused. Todd Clever told us this great story when he played for the Lions in South Africa. He knew Schalk Burger was one of the players and he was looking out for him. And he's like, wow, South Africa really dislikes Schalk Burger. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's even a newspaper that says Die Burger on it. I go, oh, no, he's not saying he should die. It's the name. D means the. And the newspaper's called The Burger. And so he was like, oh, I just thought they really were obsessed with their rugby and didn't like Schalk at all.
Yeah, that translation leads to a lot of very funny stories, particularly in rugby.
Well, Gary, listen, we're going to get you on again, obviously. We can fill up 5 podcasts with all your great insights and stories. Really appreciate your time. It's such a pleasure to speak to somebody with your background and knowledge, and really brilliant to have you on the Rugby Hive.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, guys. Rob, Dallen, it's been really good to be here, and look forward to coming back one day if you'll have me.
Awesome. We have you all the time, my friend.
Beautiful ball over the top. Yes, Seppo!
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive Podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.
I've taken a lunch money from South